Show. Let's go. The 580 Show. Let's go. The 580 Show.
All right, everyone. Welcome to episode 146 of the 580 Show. I'm joined today by Taylor Gohn. Thanks for joining, man.
What's up, man? Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was just telling you real quick off camera, but a highly recommended coach of someone to have on, and I'm really excited to get to talk to you a little bit because I think there's
Yeah,
a
well,
lot
thank you, man.
there's a lot to learn here. So, I get so one question I wanted to lead off with is the importance of a coach having a coach, because I think sometimes it's a really debated thing where people think, oh, you're a coach, so why do you need a coach? Well,
Right.
and I see you in your posts sometimes. You're coached by Zach and
Mhm.
McCarley. I think I'm
Yes.
pronouncing that correctly. And you're it seems like in your posts, you talk highly about him and get a lot from having a coach. So I was just kind of wanting to get your thoughts on coaches having coaches and what you kind of think about that and the importance of it.
Yeah. So first off, I think what we see in the industry as far as like uh, that not being a normal thing, and maybe it kind of being a common thing for coaches to not really want to share their information or have other coaches or other people see their programs other than their clients, or just like different gatekeeping kind of ego driven stuff like that. Um, that's that's not normal in other sports, like fully developed sports that have money and you know a dense population of athletes, and much more competitive. These sports, it's not normal to hide information. It's actually very normal for coaches to be collaborating in the off season and getting together and exchanging information, in the same sort of urgency and competitiveness that the athlete is going to have on the field. It's part of our job to progress the sport in any way that we can. And so I do believe the information exchange between coaches is really important for the competitive benefit, both short term and long term. But to speak on it for myself, because a lot of coaches don't necessarily compete, so they don't necessarily need to have a coach. With me trying to balance both, it got to a point where anytime I would do a prep, I actually started trying to find ways to prepare for shows with shorter amount of times, because it would contradict my ability to coach and my capacity to coach, and it would kind of take away from that, and it was getting really frustrating. So hiring Zach has been super helpful, because not only am I able to continue learning myself as a student, I'm also got my plate completely cleared to give everything that I have to my athletes. So it's freed up a lot of my time, a lot of my stress has gone away, and I almost think back now, thinking that it might be a little ignorant or arrogant even to think you can push a high level for both. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Like what are some things, I guess, when you coach yourself, like what are some issues you find? Like, do you think you overanalyze yourself? Like, because you obviously know yourself more than anyone and I don't know, like what issues do you see you run into if you do coach yourself?
Yeah. So the overanalyzing was kind of like a prior problem that I had, but the most recent thing that I've been dealing with is the the self doubt and the like needing to not only needing to perform to a certain level, but needing to program to a certain level. And when you start adding in the emotions and the expectations of the athlete, I'm kind of sitting there questioning, if I had a bad session, if I missed a number, I'm going home super anxious, super frustrated, trying to rebuild the entire plan. Where now it's like, well, that's Zach's problem if I miss a
Yeah.
number, and I don't really care. It's just another training session.
Yeah.
We've been doing this forever, so it's no big deal. Um, yeah,
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I think almost too, because I want to talk about the mental side of everything too, but I think having a coach is sometimes like, and I don't mean to like downplay the mental side of things, but it can almost be like having a therapist where you can vent, like in your instance, you can vent to Zach, right? And say, hey
Yeah,
man, like shit just doesn't feel right. Like my log feels, and it's almost like a vent and it's like a positive vent. Even when something is going wrong, you're able to utilize them as like a therapist almost,
right.
And,
Yeah, it's like I when I have to reinforce myself and encourage myself, I will then question that reinforcement. But if Zach says, "Hey man, you're good. It's going as planned," I'm like, "Cool, got it.
yeah,
I trust you." You know,
hired him
I
for a
don't trust
reason, right?
myself like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. No, that's and another thing you said that I thought was really cool was like about like the arrogance to think you don't need a coach and how that doesn't happen in like other major sports. And it's like, I think of like I've heard like the boxing analogy all the time with like Mike Tyson or like Muhammad Ali. Like they were the best boxers on the planet at that time, and they have some guy who isn't even a boxer coaching them, but he's a
Exactly.
boxing coach. So I just thought that was like such a real like I thought that was a really good point that you made.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty rare in anything that you see. Like most of my wrestling coaches that were like the ones that really stood out in my life were like guys that never did anything notable as athletes. And it's kind of like, how could you expect someone to be so genetically gifted that they're talented in the planning and the logistics area as well as the performance area? You know what I mean? They're
Yeah.
two completely different things.
Yeah, no, that's 100%. Some people are just good at analyzing and communicating with people. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And
Yeah.
so this may be a little bit off topic, but with it kind of goes back to what you're talking about before with coaches like kind of gatekeeping. I think one trend I've always noticed with good coaches in strength conditioning is that they're not afraid to put their information out there.
Mhm.
I think it's more of the one like I think a lot of the really good coaches will even tell you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they're not doing anything that's crazy groundbreaking, right? They've taken stuff they've learned from different methods, different programs, whatever, and they've tried it on themselves, tried it on other people, and they've kind of created their own system or methodology. Like
Yeah.
big strength coaches will tell you, like, hey man, this is what I'm kind of the what I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's a pretty simple sport. You know, there's not much spice, I guess you can put on it
yeah,
and keep it correct. You know what I mean? Keep
right.
it
Yeah.
operating in the parameters of programming.
Right, for sure. Like I asked Terry Rady once when I had him on here, I'm like, how can I learn like from you? And he gave me a couple books to read. He's like, these are the same books I read and I applied them. So
Mm-hmm.
I bought those books and read them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, yeah, I think a lot of the coaching side is why some coaches are successful are more like their communication and like being able to analyze stuff versus like they're not doing anything. They didn't invent something crazy,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
But on the other side, I wanted to talk to you about your I guess methodology with the do I pronounce it VESP? Do I
VSP.
VSP? I didn't know if
Yeah.
you say VESP or if you say VSP, but it was something I was super interested in it because I've seen you post about it before, and I've talked to Sean about it, and he's
Mm-hmm.
mentioned to me when we've eaten together, and like, can you explain VSP versus RPE, like in
Yeah.
without going super, you don't have to go like super crazy, but can you explain VSP versus RPE?
Yeah. So RPE is like one single opinion or perception of an effort rating, and VSP is two, and that combines into an average reading, right? So you have the athlete um, giving a rating based on how it feels, and then you're combining that with how it looks in the video or how a coach is saying it looks. Because sometimes you can have something feel really good or feel really light, but then the coach sees that it moves slower than normal, and vice versa, right? You could have something feel really heavy, but the coach is like, no, that moved fast enough, you need to go up. So, yeah, Ben and I kind of came up with that because we were both training alone up until that point in our careers, and then we started training with each other, and we realized that we would get comfortable only going to a certain level when we needed to take an extra heavier attempt, because it does get, the weights get scary enough, the conditioning gets hard enough where it becomes, unless you're a fucking psychopath, it becomes impossible to day after day tell yourself this is the level you have to go to, right? So you need that second view to say, no, motherfucker, you got to go up again, or no, motherfucker, it's time to back down.
You need to dial it back. No, I'm really happy how you explain that. And for people that don't know, RPE is rate of perceived exertion, right? And so that's what we're comparing VSP to. And I think it's like spot on with the system you guys utilize, because one trend I'm seeing in powerlifting, strongman, a lot of these strength sports is specifically powerlifting, is people say it's like a 6 with a misgroove, right? But like you misgrooved it for a reason, whatever reason it is, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, you can't have, and that goes along with VSP, is that part of that forces technique and control. It's not just about how it felt or looked, it's about how was it executed, right?
Right.
It's velocity. V is velocity, E is execution, and that equals strength potential or sports potential. So it's VSP.
Yeah.
Right. So the execution is a very big part of it. If you misgrooved, well, I'm sorry, it was either too heavy and it wasn't really a 6, or you need to get your head out of your ass and you misgrooved because you're fucking around.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. It's like, it's such a cool way to implement, I think, as a coach. I think it's so smart what you and Ben did. And I think people have such a hard time being honest with themselves, where it's like, whether it is, I think lifters, you probably see it, correct me if I'm wrong, but I see some lifters that cannot be honest with themselves either way, whether it's too heavy or it's too light, like they're too afraid. And I think having a coach, and I think having your guys' system in place over RP like accounts for those issues, right?
Yeah, and that's what it was designed for. Yeah,
yeah.
To be honest, because we're big on not being comfy. That's not where growth happens. And like I said earlier, even if you're a big badass, you're going to eventually start to, if it's on your own and you're making your own decisions and your own calls day after day, it's going to get more and more comfortable and more easy to make the decisions of just a little bit less. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A little bit less effort.
I'm really happy you said that, because that's like, I think that summarizes like the whole point of like the topic we were just talking about. I guess that started this whole thing is coaches having coaches and the importance of it. It kind of came full circle where it's like you get to that comfort level where you're, I think psychologically, like 90% of people are going to only program what they want to do or what they think versus what they actually need. Does that, you know what I mean? So I'm really happy you said it that way, because that kind of summarized it, like that comfort. And you don't get better being comfortable in any sport, but specifically strength sports, where it's like the stress on your body is where like the growth happens, right? You have to have some level of stress for growth, whether it's strength, like muscle gain, anything like that. So that was a perfect way to summarize what you said. I like that a lot. As a coach, I guess, who were some of the coaches that you've learned from and like taken stuff from, like some top level people we may not know?
I try to take something from every coach that I interact with, just at least one little thing. I would say the most influential coaches in my life were like my high school wrestling coach, my college wrestling coach, a couple wrestling coaches I worked with, and like, international competing and just different teams I've been on and stuff. In lifting, the only two coaches I've ever had is Kyle Young from Kabuki. And he's been extremely influential. We still talk even 3 or 4 years later. But he was kind of one of the first guys to push me off the ledge and tell me to start going for it and believing in myself when I started working with Ben. And then Zach is the second coach that I've ever had.
Yeah.
In training, and he's already been we've been such a good team so far.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's great.
I love you saying take something from everyone, because I'm such a firm believer in that, where like even just like going to a strongman competition as a volunteer or sponsoring or being a judge, whatever, I feel like I've learned something as an athlete at every competition I've been at. And I feel like every coach I talk to on the pod, or if I meet him at the Arnold or something, like just having a small conversation, I think you can learn something, you know.
Yeah,
I think that's
even in the way they rub off on you and the way they carry themselves at a meet, or the way you see them talk to one of their athletes, just like the littlest of things that you can get. You know,
right.
You're always trying to refine your coaching game.
Yeah, I'm like such a big believer in like always being a student of the game, no matter what level you reach. And I think that's like a really great commonality between like great coaches and great athletes. Like they're always a student of the game, right? And looking for that little edge to get better, whether it's their business and coaching or their actual athleticism, right?
Yeah, and we said that earlier. We were talking about like the coaches, the way, the avenues at which the coach can like give to and improve. They need to have that competitive and urgency, just like the athlete is out there trying to get the win, right? They're going fucking hard. You're pushing your brain very hard. And it shouldn't be like this stress-free living lifestyle.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. We got to talk about it because you mentioned wrestling, and I wasn't aware of your wrestling background, but it sounds like you have a pretty intensive one. So did you start wrestling in high school, younger than that? When did you start wrestling?
Probably like third or fourth grade. Got into it pretty young, and I caught the bug for lifting like my sophomore year in college, and I was enjoying lifting so much, and I was hating wrestling so much that it was a pretty easy switch for me.
Yeah. I wrestled for a couple years, and I wish I would have wrestled like earlier in my life, like versus like late in high school. And I think it's like, I just think it's the best sport, like coming up as a kid. And I
agree.
It just teaches you some lesson about like being able to get your ass kicked, I think. And you're the only accountable person, because I think in America specifically, we like team sports are so much bigger than wrestling and other individual sports. A lot of kids don't have that accountability, and you see it later on in life. And I think, I just think there's something to be said about wrestling. Like a lot of the people you meet that are wrestled are just tougher. They're just mentally tougher and physically tougher. I don't know. I mean, I remember some of our practices were super crazy, but I don't know what it is. I don't know if you can speak on it all, but I think
actually Terry Rady was someone that I had this conversation with, because I was really frustrated with some of my higher level athletes who were not wrestlers, but they were like football players or some team sport that was still very fucking tough and respectable. You know what I mean? And they made it to a really high level. So I'm like frustrated. It's like, what? Like, why the fuck can't you show up on time? Why the fuck can't you like get it? You know what I mean? Like, trying to figure out, like, you've made it to a very high level. What's the deal? This stuff seems very obvious to me. And because Terry has been really influential, specifically in the strongman portion of my coaching. He's just been all around good friend, but he was telling me, like, yeah, man, you know, in wrestling, you face adversity. Like, you're out there alone, basically completely naked, your fucking tiny dick hanging out in front of your whole high school and your town and everything. And you're getting pissed pounded in practice day after day. And like everything about it is like forces you to ask the hard questions and like ask, why do I suck so bad? How can I get better?
Right.
You know, you get your fucking ass beat for showing up 5 minutes late, whereas opposed to at basketball, whatever, not saying these other sports aren't tough, but, if one person shows up late, then the whole team suffers, and that sucks and teaches you lessons in its own way. But you also might kind of miss the ability to really look inward and be like,
Yeah.
why do I fucking suck?
Yeah. I remember some of those wrestling. I was actually I coached some wrestlers at our gym still in strength conditioning. And I was talking to one of the dads the other day, and I'm like, I feel like some of those practices we had back in the day they're so illegal now. Like getting whipped with a whistle. Yeah. Like it's just like yeah. But something to be, I remember playing rugby in college and I didn't wrestle in college or anything like that. And I remember getting so just angry because I could work as hard as I wanted in the gym at practice or whatever, but then some kid was just slapdicking around, and I'm only 1 out of 15 guys on the field. And I'm like, I think that's why I look back to wrestling and have such like an admiration for it,
Yeah. There's no room for that.
Yeah, right.
Get away with that.
Just get your dick kicked in. I mean, there's not, it's just, that's kind of, my eyes just lit up when you said that, because you're a really great strongman athlete yourself. So it's like, I always just like to dig in a little bit when people were wrestlers, just to see what their thoughts are on it, and how it helped them as an athlete.
And that's actually why I picked Zach as my coach ultimately, is because he was a wrestler as well. So if you want another one to talk to, he's a good one.
I would love to have him on. I would like to talk to him as well. Let's talk real quick about like the mental approach to, going a prep into a competition, because I think it's something people just really get psyched out and get in their head and do things they know may not make sense intellectually, but for whatever reason get psyched out or get overstimulated or understimulated, and they get puckered, whatever. Like, can you kind of talk about how you help your athletes approach for a competition, mentally, not just physically?
Yeah. So I kind of like to break it down in tiers of competitiveness, and like I like to use the JV and the varsity analogy a lot in the world. So I split competitions up into five or six different categories. So you have like scrimmages, you have preseason games, you have conference games, you have postseason games, and then you have like title games. And each of those, in any other sport, are treated with a different level of mental and physical preparation intensity, and it scales up.
Yeah.
And the higher up you go. Yeah.
So when you're saying I'm sorry, I hope I didn't throw your thought off, but when you're saying like scrimmage, JV, like those different tiers, are you talking about that in the context of like the prep or the contest you're preparing for?
Both.
Okay.
So I'm saying like my 19 to 25-year-old strongman kids who were like, I'm fucking making it to the WSM, I'm in this for life. And because a lot, so back in that, what you're talking about getting rattled and questioning yourself in prep, whether it's like you miss a number and you retake it and you retake it, or you start taking more supplements because you're wigged out that you're not recovering enough, or that's what you're talking about, right? Like kind of like going off plan,
everything
out of urgency, right? So,
yeah, right.
Yes, in any category that I'm gonna start overeating every day because I need to get bigger. I need to get bigger right now. Or any sort of like above consistency, like panic type decision that you're making. It's lack of maturity, and I don't say that in a bad way. I mean that like pretty much every level until the very, very top level, you're going to lack some sort of something, right? And that's what makes the best guys the best, is that they have the least of those problems. So, there's still things that I deal with that like I might kind of fall into that category, but not nearly to the extent or to the frequency that I was when I was really, really young. So, yeah, basically the message I'm trying to say is like, hey, like you guys haven't earned the right to get this upset. Like you're not competing at a level that's that important to get that upset.
Yeah.
Like, and then by the time they get there, they're not upset about it because they're very mature and seasoned athletes, right? So I just try to implement like different mental structures around what is the purpose of this competition? Are you winning money? Are you winning a big title? Is it very important to you? Why are we doing this? Because strength, powerlifting, CrossFit, bodybuilding, all of them, we're trying to see a product 10, 15, 20 years down the road.
Right.
They're very accumulative sports where we're going to reap the benefits way later. So we're going to use our competitions as practice to develop these mental skills, right? We're not going to use these competitions as things to say it's do or die, it's all or nothing. This is the last contest I'm ever going to have. I'm going to put it all out there. But yes, we're going to put it all out there, but we're going to keep the next contest in mind and the next contest in mind. And we're always going to keep one more level in the tank that you can access, one more gear that you can shift to, so that when it's really important, you can turn it all the way up.
Yeah. Do people do kids that are younger, do they ever take that the wrong way? Like when you talk to them like that, like because I just think about it and I'm a pretty blunt person when I speak to people about strength sports. And I've always like the quote I've always used is a marathon, not a sprint, and it's just a simple old quote, but it's just it's not a sport if you are into instant gratification. It's the guy that's squatting heavy for 10 years and doesn't miss training days. That's going to be the strongest guy in the weight room most of the time. You know what I mean? And you mentioned about the kids that are 19 to 25. They're like, I want to go to WSM. And I wish you were lying about that, but the amount of kids that I've met that have said that, and it's like, it's so preposterous to think about where someone's 20 years old and they aren't the most genetically gifted and they're just starting and they have the nerve to say that. I try to be nice, but real with them where it's like, well, let's start here. And if you do become the world's strongest man in 20 years, that's awesome. But
Yeah. So my thing on that, this is actually cool that you brought that up, because I think, first of all, I resonate with those kids a lot because that used to be me. So
sure.
I really like take to those kids and find an easy time communicating with them, because I just think, okay, you just be what you needed 10 years ago, right?
Sure.
So those are actually kind of my bread and butter type of guys to work with. And I think, I forgot to phrase this. So I think in order to become that world's strongest man level athlete, right, we just talked about there's so many things that you need to learn and develop both mentally and physically to get to that point, right? So you've got this huge timeline and all these skills that need to be developed and come together into this final product to see that. Well, the beginning stages of all of that are still very important lessons, both physically and mentally, for kids to have. It's just like the wrestling background, right? So I don't, like, yes, it might be a little preposterous, but I also try to put that completely out of my mind, because I'm like, this kid could completely prove me wrong. Like all it takes is him sticking with it and listening.
Yeah.
And it can happen. You know what I mean? Strength is like that, where you can get past some of the genetic stuff. And so I just am like, the process begins the same for everyone, whether they're a dipshit and they're going to fall off in 2 years, or whether they're going to actually fucking follow through. The first 5 years, 10 years even, should be very, very similar, because you don't want, strongman should also be something that's like, yeah, I did it for 2 years and I got a lot out of it, and it taught me toughness and it taught me how to be comfortable out there competing, and now I can do other things in life that I was scared of. Like, it should serve that purpose too.
Oh, 100%.
So, that's what I'm trying to get at, is like, okay, well, if they fall off and they don't ever make it, we try to still give them the same good shit out of it.
Yeah.
Right.
So, so when did you get involved in strongman? Because I know you've been in it.
2015.
Yeah. Okay.
2015.
2015, you got into strongman, and what's for newer people listening? I guess what are like one or two key takeaways from when you're looking back at Taylor in 2015, 2016, your first 1 or 2 years in it. What's some advice that people that are in there for first couple years that could take away from you, speaking to yourself back then?
I would say number one, just relax and enjoy the ride. Don't try to force anything or rush anything. And two, kind of on that note, um, getting big and strong are the easiest portions of this equation. So worry about the techniques and the learning and the programming stuff and really being a student of the sport, because you get to an age when all this stuff becomes learned and you get, in your late 20s and early 30s and all this stuff comes together, putting on the size and the raw strength and power to put it all together is very easy to do, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So worry about all the other shit first.
That's really good advice. What's like one big mistake you see all the time? Like with not even just with not with your athletes specifically, but like just scrolling Instagram, seeing people at competitions, whatever. Like what's something that you're just always like puzzled by?
When someone has to like justify to themselves that they're actually this strong, right? So they're like, if you miss a number that last week you just hit this number, but then the following week you miss this number, you don't need to question yourself. You just need to like eat and recover. Like pay attention to maybe I don't hit that heavy that frequently every week. Maybe it's an every other week thing. You don't say, oh no, am I not really this strong? I need to fucking show myself that I can still hit 4 plates. That's what I mean by chill out and enjoy the ride, is that strength goes like this. So just the strongest men in the world are part of the reason that they are that strong is because they are very okay with saying, it's not there today. It'll be there when I need it.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome advice. I think that's great because so many people look at training as like perfectly linear, right?
yeah,
Where it's just that, and it's just being in it, you realize it is just so far from it. And it's those little 5-pound PRs after 2 years that that you work for once you get to a certain level, it's 2, 3, 4 years to hit a 5-pound PR in a deadlift, right? Or an overhead press. And it's like, that makes you appreciate it so much more. So
exactly.
That's such a good point. So since 2015, not in coaching, just in the sport of strongman, what are some trends that you have seen come and go that you've been a fan of, or maybe happening now that or have happened in the past that you don't like? I know that's a kind of a tough question on the spot, but just being in it that long and around it, like something you've seen a lot of the amateur level like growth of strongman. So
I'll say 2 things that I don't like, not to be negative, but just when it comes to noticing trends, you don't really notice the positive ones.
Sure.
So well, I can't say that. I think the sport is growing. So the negative one that I really don't like is that it seems that there are a lot of people that are bitching and moaning about how much this, like, we need to do this with the sport. We need to do this with the sport. It needs to grow this much. We should be getting this much money, this and that. And it's like, man, when was the sport officially invented? Like 1977?
Right. Yeah. 70s.
So it's like the newest fucking sport on the planet, basically.
Yep.
So like with where we're chill out and enjoy the ride. The same principles that work fundamentally in your training are going to work in bigger areas of the sport and life. So I think rather than bitch, just find a way to do your part and grow the sport.
Yeah, right.
it's going. So
Yeah,
you
leave
just gotta
it.
let it happen.
Yeah, I think if everyone approached Strongman with like the view of, let me leave it better than I found it, right? Like
1%.
let me go to this local show in Western Pennsylvania and just like, because I'm bitching on Instagram, right, that the sport's not growing. I'm gonna go give up a Saturday and volunteer, and just
Yeah.
doing that, like I I earned that iron credit. I reset the power stairs for 2 hours, even though it sucked.
Yeah.
But I genuinely made it better. I think that's
Yeah.
like, you don't need to like start a federation or do something like that. I think it's like smaller things, right, that you can do to just
Exactly.
be better and but still have
Getting
such a positive impact.
if we got like imagine if we got every low level entry novice level competition, right? If every year we got like 3 to 5 more competitors, and every competitor from the previous year got 5 to 10% stronger and more competitive with each other,
Right.
right? And growing up from that level, and then we start having the coaches come together and implementing different ways to exchange information in the off seasons and help maybe coaches and athletes get together with promoters and figure out how to structure better in season and off seasons throughout these shows, so that like you're getting more of the good athletes showing up at these shows, so it's not hit and miss, and you're like seeing these athletes at these shows and these athletes at these shows. Are kind of using all federations instead of maybe favoring one federation, and
Yeah, for sure.
any way we can make it more competitive.
I think when people have like such an extreme bias where they're like, I won't do Strongman Corp or I won't do USS, like I'm a
You're part of the
strongman.
problem.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a Strongman Corporation state chair, and I will
Right.
never not do a show because it's USS or it's unsanctioned or whatever. Like, dude, if I see like some of the best shows I've ever done have been USS shows. Some of the best,
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? It's like I will
Yeah.
never see a show I want to do, and like I like the promoter or I think the promoter's gonna do a good job. I'm not gonna, and I want to compete. I'm not gonna not compete, right? Because I do this because I
Exactly.
have fun, and I want to make a point. I want to see your thoughts on it because people are going to listen. We're going to have new viewers because you're on this episode. And it's one thing I think a lot of people can do having an impact is after a competition, be honest. Don't be a dick, right? I think there's a fine line between like being an asshole and being honest. Is be honest with what a show can do to improve. Like, obviously, highlight their good stuff, and promoters can all learn the great stuff from each other. But also, the reason I bring it up, I see such a big trend in Strongman with people behind the scenes in DMs, right? Saying, oh, this show was horrible. It took 14 hours. We didn't get to warm up. But then what happens in the recap on their little Instagram post after the show? Oh, great show. Thank you so much for having us out. This was amazing. I'll be back next year. I just think the way that Strongman is tiered in the United States is it's an amateurs fun strongman. And I think people are afraid to have their voice be heard. And I think being honest, like I said, you don't need to be rude, but like, hey, if I'm going to do the show next year, can we maybe warm up on the yoke? Can we maybe logistically think this out so we're not going to get hurt or we're not here for 14 hours? You know what I mean? I just,
I think like if you've got that much of a problem, then fucking grow up and say something articulate
right.
professionally, right? So just like with anything else, like if you're saying some shit that I don't like, I'm gonna be like, hey man, I don't like you saying that shit about me. Let's go out.
Right.
Give you a chance to explain or give you a chance to change,
Yeah. I think promoters sometimes don't know. I'm just gonna say this, but like don't know that their show kind of stinks sometimes because so many people keep coming back and keep complimenting them. I guess I don't know. I think
settling for those standards or whatever. You should be like, hey man, this is unacceptable. We're not coming back next year. If this is how it's going to keep happening.
Right. And
if it's not big of a problem,
Yeah, right. And don't get me wrong, like I think there's a place for every type of competition in strongman. Like I think the coolest shows that I've ever been to have been like those super grassroots like parking lot shows. I think a lot of people that have been in for a while can relate to that, right? Like the show you weren't expecting to be awesome. That's like
Yeah,
in an alley, and it's like we're throwing a rock or whatever. Like I think sometimes that's the best show. So I'm not saying like every show has to be like the world championship. I'm just
right.
saying if you notice something at a competition, like speak up in a super respectful way, and that promoter might like the light bulb might go off and be like,
Yeah,
oh,
I don't think there's anything wrong with just speaking up. And if you do it professionally, you're going to get one or two reactions. He's going to tell you to fuck off, or he's going to be accepting of it,
right.
or three reactions. He's going to be like, okay, cool. So Great Lakes Strongest Man. I actually had a couple of notes when the event weights came out. I was like, hey man, here's my 2 cents. I think you should make these changes. It's just my opinion. I don't think it's wrong for you to make these decisions the way you have them. Just my opinion. Do that way you want. Tell me to fuck off if you want.
Yeah.
And he's like, cool, man. Well, just to let you know, I'm gonna professionally not take your advice, but I want to tell you my reasons behind each of the decisions I've made. And then once you told me, I'm like, yeah, those are really good decisions. I think you made better calls than I did initially. So
Right.
cool, we're good.
Right. No,
And that's how it should be.
right. No, 100%. I actually think about a personal experience I just had. Like I did a show in Kentucky, and the power stairs were so light, like the point, like the weights listed, right? Were so light where the point, like to the point where you could literally probably skip a step. Like you could like throw them. And then I got mad because 10 days out, they changed the weights and made them heavier. But I could have done what you did and reached out to the promoter and been like, hey, man, not trying to be a dick. These are super light in training. Do you, that kind of was just a little bit of self-reflection, like what you said with like reaching out, right? So like if something seems wrong while you're an athlete, like maybe it is wrong, and like just reach out, and you can be a positive impact in that way as well. So yeah, no, that's super cool, man. Is there anything else? Well, how was Great Lakes Strongest Man? So you competed. I was at the first ever Great Lakes Strongest Man.
Yeah, it was awesome. I told George I'm going to come back next year. Josh wants to do it next year. I mean, I've done several pro am shows now, and that was my favorite one.
Yeah.
There's nothing that was distinguishable between Strongman Corp and USS. It was heavy. They paid. The guys were tough. It was really tough.
It's super cool that like that show has become like such a big deal, and it's just like up in Traverse City, Michigan. Like that's a great area, but like not the most accessible area in the world, right? And like yeah, I think it speaks super highly, like that they're able to get somebody right. Like I said, I was at the very first ever Great Lakes Strongest Man when it was in like a CrossFit gym, and it's like cool. I would like to go back just to see like it's on like a minor league baseball stadium now, and it's like set up awesome, and ADL's there, and they have a pro show. It's crazy to see like the growth of it, right? So I definitely got to go back. Have you? I know. Talking to Sean, you've tried because you're a super heavyweight, open super heavyweight, and you've tried to make the cut to middleweight before, right? Like you've cut to middleweight.
I've tried,
yeah. So what's that? What was that like? I guess like I mean that's a pretty drastic change. What made at the time? What made you want to do that? I guess, and like what was the experience like trying to do that?
You want to know what initially got the spark going?
What's that?
I got done with it was a heavyweight show. I think it was Rainier last year, and I got done, and Rainey looks at me and he's like, "Man, you'd be a real good 231." And I was like, "Man, I'm 300 pounds." And he's like, "Well, Clayton can make it. You can make it."
Yeah.
you be good 231. You should try it. And I was like, fuck, I gotta try it now. So I tried it. Didn't have it in me. So
Yeah.
just lost way too much strength. Wasn't willing to take the drugs to keep the strength.
Yeah.
When I started going to that much of a deficit, so it's not worth it for me.
Yeah. It's crazy because I think like now I think a lot of like novices or newer people like see the weight cuts and they think it's just like automatic, like, oh, I'll just cut 40 pounds and I'll log press. I'm gonna log press the same thing I press it, at 300 in my own gym, and I'm gonna do it 231 in a show. You know what I mean? So no, I like to touch on that. I think like one of the biggest things I see as a promoter mistakes we were talking about earlier, some of the biggest mistakes you see is I think one of mine is the crazy weight cut shit you see. Like the mistakes that people make and the stuff what people are willing
to awful. And some of the fucking coaches that are willing to offer coaching for weight cuts and nutrition. It's like I'm not at the point where I'm going to call out any names yet. But it's fucking awful. It's like you guys have no clue what you're doing.
Well,
you're just prescribing telling them to drink more water, and I can't even.
Yeah, no, I was super. Yeah, I was super lucky to learn like what I learned about water cuts initially from Rebecca Lorch. And she was so great. And so, the one thing it ties in with what you were just saying, but the thing I loved the most about her approach was she would not allow you to go over a certain threshold of your body percentage.
Yep.
And I thought that was so like kind of admirable and respectable for a coach, because a lot of people can just, hey, I'll take your money, whatever. But I think to do it like to care about the client and the person's paying you, I thought that was like such a cool thing that she did, right?
So she was helping me a little bit out with that, and I was like, because we knew right from the start it was going to be a fucking hard one. It was going to be close.
Yeah.
So like the whole time she was like, you're like 1 or 2% over what I'll allow.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure, man. But no, that's really cool. I don't have anything else for you. I thought we touched on some awesome stuff. I hope people are able to take from it. I hope to have you on again in the future, man. Like I said, on this episode, if you guys go in the description, if you're watching on YouTube, we'll have right under your video, we have your name, how to get a hold of you. How do people get a hold of you for coaching?
Through Instagram.
Yeah, just DM. Cool. So your Instagram name's up on the screen right now if they're watching on YouTube, and we'll have it if you're listening on Spotify or iTunes, how to follow you on Instagram and everything like that. So make sure you're getting a hold of Taylor, because I think he's one of the top coaches in Strongman and just overall, just talking to you real quick. So I appreciate it so much, man. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, man. Anytime. Let me know if you ever want to get back on.
Of course. Thanks.
The 580 Show.